All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're stepping back into the dark, incredibly mysterious atmosphere of 19th century vanishing acts. This was an era of rapid modernization, but it still harbored these massive, seemingly impenetrable mysteries. And we're going to start things off with a brilliant writer who met a truly, truly bizarre end.
So, we all know Edgar Allan Poe wrote some of the world's most terrifying horror stories, right? Well, his own death remains one of history's creepiest unsolved mysteries. Picture this, October 3, 1849. Poe was found completely delirious, just collapsed on the wet cobblestone streets of Baltimore. The fog is rolling in, it's pouring rain, and he's wearing these oversized, disheveled clothes that weren't even his. He'd been completely off the grid for 5 whole days, totally unable to explain how he got there. And the doctors? They had zero medical explanation for his condition. None.
And it gets weirder. While drifting in and out of consciousness in this dimly lit hospital room, Poe repeatedly screamed a single mysterious name: Reynolds. Who on earth was Reynolds? We literally have absolutely no idea. And to heighten the tension even further, all of his official hospital records, his death certificates, they just vanished without a single trace. There's no paper trail at all. His dying screams just became this eternal, terrifying secret taken straight to the grave.
That bizarre 5-day gap poses a really fascinating question. If a famous, highly recognizable guy can just vanish into thin air in a crowded city, what happens when an entire crew disappears on the open ocean? I mean, if the cobblestones of Baltimore can swallow a person's story whole, just imagine the kinds of secrets the deep Atlantic can keep. That brings us to the discovery of the ghost ship, the Mary Celeste. To really wrap our heads around this, the ultimate locked room mystery of the sea, we first need to understand the ship's deeply troubled past. See, the vessel itself had a completely cursed history right from its very first days. She was originally built in Nova Scotia in 1861 and named the Amazon. But get this, during her maiden voyage, her first captain fell ill and died. Later on, she collided with fishing equipment, actually sank a brig in the English Channel, and then in 1867, she was driven ashore in a massive storm and damaged so badly they just abandoned her as a wreck. Eventually, she was salvaged, sold to American owners, rebuilt, and reborn as the Mary Celeste in 1868. By 1872, she had been extensively refitted and enlarged. Okay, fast forward to November 7, 1872. The newly enlarged Mary Celeste leaves New York Harbor bound for Genoa, Italy. On board, a cargo of exactly 1,701 barrels of highly volatile industrial alcohol. Along with that dangerous cargo were 10 people: Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their infant daughter Sophia, and a hand-picked, highly capable crew of 7 men. Now, Captain Briggs was known as a careful, deeply religious man. He's the kind of guy who would never recklessly abandon his ship or lead a panicked crew into disaster. In fact, in a letter just before the voyage, he said he was eminently satisfied with his vessel and his crew. They sailed out into the vast Atlantic and were literally never seen again. Weeks later, the ship is found. And this is where the logic completely breaks down. It's baffling. On December 4th, 1872, a Canadian brigantine called the Dei Gratia spots the Mary Celeste sailing erratically near the Azores. They board the ship, and it's a total ghost town. There was 3.5 feet of water in the hold, which actually is a very manageable amount for a ship that size. The single lifeboat, the yawl, was missing, along with the navigational instruments. But here's the kicker. Those 1,701 barrels of cargo, totally untouched. 6 months' worth of provisions were still sitting right there on board, and all personal belongings were completely undisturbed. The last log entry was from 9 days prior, on November 25th. So you have a fully seaworthy ship, just completely abandoned. Which leads us to the Gibraltar salvage hearings and the paranoid investigations that followed. Because, as we know, when hard facts vanish, paranoia is more than happy to take over. The crew of the Dei Gratia managed to sail the ghost ship into Gibraltar to claim a salvage reward. And man, this is where things get truly chaotic. Try to put yourself in the shoes of that court for a second. What actually happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste? Why in the world would an experienced, incredibly careful captain abandon a perfectly good ship in the middle of the ocean? You gotta remember, the public back then felt the exact same bewilderment you might be feeling right now. No signs of a storm, no signs of a fire, the ship was completely intact. Enter Frederick Solly Flood, the guy leading the hearing. He desperately pushed these completely unfounded, wild theories. First, he hypothesized a drunken crew mutiny, basically suggesting they broke into that massive cargo of alcohol and just committed mass murder in a wild frenzy. When that didn't stick, he argued that marks on the ship's bow were deliberate cuts made to fake a collision. He even suspected collusion between Captain Briggs and the captain of the Dei Gratia to commit salvage fraud. And just to be clear, there was absolutely zero evidence for any of this. To give you a real sense of what these investigators were dealing with, historians later described Sally Flood as a man whose arrogance and pomposity were inversely proportional to his IQ. Ouch, right? But his sheer stubbornness in trying to prove this massive criminal conspiracy meant that the innocent crew of the Dei Gratia, the guys who literally heroically salvaged the ship, were treated with intense suspicion. Because of his baseless theories, they ended up receiving a shockingly low fraction of the cost salvage reward. Ultimately, the Gibraltar hearings ended completely inconclusively, and the mystery just sort of drifted out into the public consciousness. So let's talk about when fiction replaces fact. Conan Doyle's intervention. This is how pop culture permanently hijacked reality. You know how it is. The public desperately craved an answer. We naturally hate unresolved narratives. It drives us crazy. Well, in 1884, a young doctor and aspiring writer named Arthur Conan Doyle, yep, the guy who later created Sherlock Holmes, took the bare bones of this real-life mystery and wrote a highly sensationalist fictional story called J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. He published it anonymously in the Cornhill magazine. But here's the genius part. He presented the story not as fiction, but as an actual first-person eyewitness testimony from a survivor. And oh man, it completely captured the global imagination. Conan Doyle didn't just tweak the facts, he totally rewrote them to craft a sensational thriller. Look at the reality. The ship was the Mary Celeste, it was slightly waterlogged, missing a single lifeboat, and found near the Azores. But in Conan Doyle's fiction, he renames it the Mary Celeste. He writes that it was found in a quote-unquote perfect state, with the lifeboat still sitting right there. He threw in magical stone idols, a random detour to the coast of Africa, and this vengeful mass murderer named Septimius Goring. He totally replaced the eerie, quiet silence of the real mystery with this loud, action-packed, Hollywood-style thriller. And this is exactly where the myth overtakes history. The story was written so convincingly that on April 3, 1885, the Boston Herald mistakenly reprinted Conan Doyle's fictional story as a true historical account. I mean, think about the incredible irony here. Conan Doyle accidentally misspelled the ship's name as Mary Celeste, and the entire world just eagerly accepted the typo and his literal ghost story as absolute historical truth. Even today, if you ask people, they'll often call it the Mary Celeste purely because of this one piece of fiction. Moving on to the ship's final fates, the mundane realities. Because while the legend of the ghost ships soared into the supernatural, the actual physical vessels were stuck in the real world. The actual fate of these ships was honestly startlingly unglamorous. The Dei Gratia, the ship that found the ghost vessel, was sold off to Irish owners in 1881 and eventually just succumbs to bad weather, wrecking in a storm off Wales in 1907. And as for the legendary Mary Celeste, she actually just continued working as a regular merchant ship for over a decade. Finally, in 1885, her new captain intentionally sailed her straight into a reef off the coast of Haiti. Why? In a desperate, totally botched insurance fraud scam. It wasn't a giant squid, it wasn't a bloody mutiny, and it certainly wasn't magical stone idols that brought down the Mary Celeste. It was just plain, boring, old financial greed. Which leaves us to ponder something really profound about how we consume the past. When Edgar Allan Poe vanished into that Baltimore fog, or when Captain Briggs and his crew stepped off the Mary Celeste into total oblivion, they left behind a massive void of facts. So I'm going to leave you with this to take away from our explainer today. Is history written by the facts we leave behind, or the fictions we invent to fill the gaps? Keep asking questions, keep looking past the myths, and I'll see you in the next explainer.